recording this while I drive down to Massachusetts. It's 18th of December, 2025. So I'm going to be that guy because a lot of other people aren't saying this and it needs to be said. So first and foremost, it is an absolute tragedy that Rob Reiner died along with his wife the way they did. Nobody deserves that. I did not take any pleasure in finding out, that something that tragic had happened to the guy. I disliked him very strongly. I disagreed with almost every single thing that ever came out of his mouth. He seemed to genuinely lean into the meathead sort of stereotype, from All in the Family. But it's interesting if you look up the history of Carroll O'Connor, because of course he played a character that was the opposite of Meathead, but his actual politics, the actor Carroll O'Connor, they were all aligned. They were all lefties in Hollywood. And the similarity between his life and his son, who died of a drug overdose, and Rob Reiner's scenario, it boggles the mind. And again, I'm gonna get some hate from this, but I don't care. I'm genuinely, I think this needs to be said. I'm genuinely frustrated with seeing so many comments where people are saying, oh, they did the best they could. They did the best they could for Nick. They helped him as much as they can. They couldn't have done anything more. Really? I have empathy for somebody who has a child that struggles with addiction or is going through mental health situations or whatever. I do have empathy for somebody who's a blue-collar person that's living paycheck to paycheck, just a regular, normal, lower middle class, regular middle class person who quite literally needs to go to work and continue working in order to put food on the table and pay the mortgage or pay their rent or whatever. I have empathy for those people because that's difficult. It's difficult to just stop your life to solve that kind of a scenario. I mean, first of all, there's signs that probably happened for a decade plus before he ended up in rehab at 15 years old. And having gone to rehab apparently 18 times in his lifetime, something like that. But here's the thing, what I don't have empathy for, who I don't feel bad for, is people who are filthy rich like the Reiners, where he could have just not done a movie next year, going back, 20 years ago, right? He could have skipped one of the projects he had, or put it on the back burner, put a project on hold. He could have actually stopped his life and genuinely gotten to the root of the problem here. And maybe that would have been that his kid was insane. Maybe he just didn't win the genetic lottery. He really genuinely got a bad card, and he was somebody who's going to always be mentally unstable. Well, then he should have been in a some sort of mental health hospital or whatever. I'm not trying to say I have all the solutions, but the point is, these people live in a way that is not conducive to healthy behavior and healthy child rearing or any of this stuff, right? Rob Reiner was out here every single day complaining about Trump. Radical leftist, right? Everything was bad that most of us normal people find wholesome, right? Borders are bad. Firearms are bad. All just never-ending onslaught from these people of radical leftist propaganda. And yet, look what's going on in their own household. Look at how they ended up going out. I feel bad. I empathize. It is tragic. It's terrible. It should have never happened. They didn't deserve that. However, where I stop is the empathy going full force to, oh, they're just horrible victims and nothing could have been done. Bullshit. No. I'm not buying that. Neither should you. That's insane. It's absolute bullshit. These people raised this kid. Their politics are tied in very directly into what happened. These are the same people who have absolutely no ability to ever admit that there needs to be some accountability or some level of responsibility or some level of actually taking ownership in the life choices you make. You know, everything with them is open borders. Everybody's a victim. Every criminal gets endless empathy, while the victim gets, in many cases, doesn't even have the ability to, based on their political ideals, the victims in a lot of violent crimes get way less empathy than the criminals do. That's literally their politics. I don't feel bad for you if you do that your whole life and you end up like that is in a way a perfect illustration. This horrific crime that happened to them is the perfect illustration of where these lefties are pushing society. They are nihilistic, out of touch, radical leftist, communist idiots. And again, it is terrible what happened. I don't take nothing about it is good. Nothing about it is, I'm not saying it's justice what happened to them. You understand? I don't mean to say I don't have empathy, but I don't have empathy in the sense that these people have harsh opinions about somebody who's, let's say, voted for Trump. Let's talk about Trump for a second. Sure. Okay, Rob Reiner. Which one of Trump's kids is a loser druggie that murdered his own parents? It's not a coincidence that the radical left cannot take accountability for their own actions, refuses to let conservatives steer them in the direction of accountability, responsibility, and right and wrong or morality, and yet this is how they end up. It's not. It's just like the politicians who get whacked over the head by somebody in a robbery and end up crying and crying about how they're victims because they were robbed in the city that they have decided to turn to a shithole by voting for the left and allowing cashless bail and all this other crap. You know, I'm a fairly nuanced person. I can see the nuance in almost everything. You know, again, it comes down to that whole thing of conservatives can understand, empathize, and rationalize and also articulate what the left feels, and we understand, at least to some degree, where they are coming from. It's the radical left that can't wrap their mind around conservative ideas because they're the insane ones. They're not living on the same plane of reality as most of us. They've completely lost their hold on any sense of morality or whatever. If everything's completely relative and there is no truth, or as these idiots say, they all have their own truth, which means nothing. If everybody has their own version of the truth, then there is no truth. It's a nihilistic, idiotic, backwards way of thinking. And so, yeah, you know what? I probably sound a little bit cold saying this, but I think the Reiners are a cautionary tale of everything that's wrong with the left. And I hope this kid gets the death penalty. He deserves absolutely to be punished for his horrible crime, alleged. However, isn't it ironic that the same money that the Reiners hoarded with all of their endless Hollywood slop that they kept putting out? I mean, like, listen, I like Princess Bride. It's a great movie. I'm not saying I never appreciated some of the stuff Meathead did, but at the same time, all of that money that they hoarded, all those yachts, the house, whatever the hell crap they had, I don't really care. I don't give a shit. The point is, all of that money that they hoarded, did it bring them that extra level of happiness that was worth losing not losing their child, but essentially having their child completely go off the rails the way he did, and then having them murder them. And of course, that same money is now being used by the lawyers to defend this idiot. So, in the end, once again, the lawyers win, right? The lawyers get money out of all of this. The Reiners are dead, and they probably would have been cool people to hang out with, by the way, if I could have stomached his absolutely insufferable, insane, disgusting political opinions. I probably would have had fun hanging out with Rob Reiner, because I'm sure in some ways he was a great, fun dude to hang out with. I acknowledge that. A lot of the lefties, they're insufferable people, and they're completely out of touch from reality. But I don't agree with all of Fiona Apple's politics, but I think it's fantastic that she called out MTV and Hollywood and the music industry the way she did when she was just a kid. I think that's fantastic. I don't agree with her with everything, but at least she took a major step, no matter how risky it was, to speak on a topic that she knew quite intimately, and tried to be, I don't know. I'm bringing her up just because it's funny. It got brought up today in a conversation I brought up. The idea that she went up there and she said, this is all bullshit, celebrity, Hollywood, everything. And I think that that's healthy. I think celebrity worship is absolutely toxic. But it is, again, it's very curious to me that people don't see the forest for the trees. Rob Reiner and his wife died because they lived their life based on their idiotic, backwards, stupid politics. They were unhinged people who couldn't bring themselves to understand a conservative perspective on anything. And it's the conservatives, it's the Christians, it's the people actually putting the work out there who are bringing people back from the brink, whether it's addiction or other toxic stuff. This kid needed parents. He didn't need celebrities in his life. He needed parents in his life. And they clearly failed him. I'm sorry, that might seem harsh. And I'm sure people will come out and have some bullshit narrative about how, they did everything they could, and God forbid that happened to you. My daughters and my kids aren't the issue here. My kids aren't druggies, and if I knew that one of my daughters was having an issue with drugs, even if it bankrupted me, I would go out of my way to make sure that my child's going to, first of all, I didn't raise a child that, this kid's ruining the guest house, and they enabled this kid for his whole life. Look, I'm trying to be delicate about this, but really, go read and listen to what people are writing. People that knew these people, right? So people in Hollywood, their friends, their family. Nobody was shocked when this happened that Nick was the one who did it. As a matter of fact, everybody came out of the woodwork saying, "Oh dear God, that was Nick." Okay, so it was preventable because everybody knew it was going to happen. So, sorry, not sorry. Leftism is a cancer.